You should also be seeing my screen. Let me know if you don't.
Yeah, we see.
Great. Thank you. So Rosetta version 8.1. This is our major semi-annual release, which we recently released out to general availability. I will talk about today. I'll show the highlights together with my colleagues, and we'll do a demo as much as possible on some of the major features. A lot of really great stuff as part of this release, mainly coming from requests coming from customers. Beyond also the general stability of the system, security issues, and so on, and also I'll talk a bit about what's coming up in 8.2. So these are just a brief sort of overview of what we're introducing. Three main areas of focus: data management, preservation, and infrastructure, which includes also a big project we did in documentation. Data management, and this is really the major feature, the central feature of 8.1. It was a very large-scale development where originally the request coming from the working groups was to allow to replicate a structural map from one representation to another, but we took this further to allow for a much more streamlined method and mechanism to automatically generate an additional preservation copy, including also structural map. And we'll talk about that, and you will see also what that looks like in the system. The second one is harvesting, allowing to harvest many OAI sets in one job. This was as part of sort of reducing the number of configurations and facilitating the whole workflow around integrating with external sources. And then around preservation, quite a lot of changes around the system. We've recently introduced the format validation, splitting metadata extraction and format validation. So now we're allowing to search by the format validation automatic rule. And then also some additions in the rule page. So we're allowing to display and search by the rule ID, which we'll see. We index the format library version per file according to where the validation or the processing is being run. I'll talk about validating source metadata upon ingest, which also came from the working groups. And we've added additional improvements to the basic preservation plan. Documentation and infrastructure. So we've continued the improvement of the integration with S3 storage. And this is an ongoing epic. Every release we're coming with additional improvements to the integration with S3 storage. We are seeing S3, both cloud, but mainly local object storage becoming more and more common. We're working with several customers to improve the integration with S3. A very large, it doesn't look big, C data management. It looks innocent, but there was a huge amount of work invested into improving the management of C data. And there were a lot of complexities here, really going into the core elements of some of the third parties that we use, taking them apart, rebuilding them to allow a more consistent behavior across the system. Here too, we work together very closely with customers. And as usual, third-party upgrades to stay up to date and secure. So we have the teams in parallel here, which was by mistake, but people keep on joining. Okay, so we'll start with data management. Wasim will show in a second the workflow for this major feature. So what we're doing here is, well, until now, the situation was that as part of the ingest, as part of the enrichment process or normalization, call it however you like, we are supported generating a derivative copy beyond the deposited preservation copy. And if an institution wanted to generate an additional preservation copy, like a modified master or similar, which needs to be preserved and not just a derivative copy, then they had to run a migration job or add it manually and so on. While there are use cases where the institution knows ahead of time that they want an additional preservation copy of a different format, we're now allowing to run that as already part of the ingest process. So we have, it's basically a variation of the previous create derivative copy. You can now create any type of copy as part of the ingest process. And not only as part of the ingest process, it's actually a process or similar to any task chain, which you can run at any given point in the system, but it also allows you to run it already on the ingest. So as you can see here in the screenshot, you could deposit the original preservation copy, and then as part of the ingest, generate a modified master, for example. And you can define which transformation profile, which migration you want to run, which is more like a normalization at this stage. So it will create, if your original was a TIFF file, you can create a JPEG 2000 additional copy. The big addition here is also the fact that you can copy the logical structural map. The use case here was institutions. They work very hard to create a logical struct map. Sometimes they have hundreds of pages to a book, to a single representation. They then create a parallel representation of a different format, and they have to regenerate a parallel structural map, logical structural map for the table of contents, for example, of the second representation. So what we're allowing here is that as part of this automatic generation of the second copy, you can also then copy over the logical struct map. And the system will then do that for you. It will create in an intelligent way the new structural map, and will also take into account something which Wasim will show, in case the new representation has less files than the original. And the system will then know how to readjust the structural map according to the new structure and the new files that you have in the system. So I encourage you all to test this out, this feature, and I'll now hand over to Wasim to demo this feature. So Wasim, feel free to grab the screen.
Thank you, Daniel. I'll start by sharing my screen. Just give me a second. Yes, please. Okay, you should be able to see my screen.
3,
Yes.
2, 1.
Yes.
We could see it.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, I took the liberty of preparing the task chain beforehand and ingesting an IE. I'll explain a bit of what I did. So let's take a look at the task chain itself. Here we go. The first thing you can notice that we have changed the name of the representation. In the past, it was create derivative copy. Now it's create copy representation because we now allow the preservation output to be of any type that we have in the system. The first two things that you can notice here is that we have a checkbox which is called copy logical struct map. As Daniel mentioned, it's when this box is checked, we will copy all the logical struct map related to the original preservation that we have created. And we have two extra options, the preservation type output and the validation stack. In the past, we allowed only to have a derivative copy, which we kept the same behavior. But now we allow to add more, to choose a different one, like in the guide master in this case. And we also run the validation stack on it. For my example, I will be showing two TIFF files and PDF merging them into a single file, and how the logical struct map will be copied and adapted to the new outputted file. I'll exit here. I'll get back to the system. Here we go. I will open the ingested file that I prepared beforehand. As said before, we have two TIFF files, carpet.TIFF and carpet2TIFF. And I'd like to show you the struct map that we have created. As you can see, we have two logical struct map and a single physical struct map. Let's look at the object and take a look at the struct map and what we have in them. I'll start with showing the logical struct maps. As you can see, this is a simple struct map. We have the two labels, the preservation master, table of contents. I took the liberty of calling them page 1 and page 2, but of course you can name them whatever you want. And the second logical struct map is chapters. We have both of the files under the label of a chapter. So it's like mimicking a real scenario. So we get back to our services and we'll run the job. I called it create copy presentation modified because we'll be creating a modified version, a modified representation. Okay, here we go. I'll just run the task. Please note that we will also be running the validation stack on it. Here we go. Awesome. Let's make sure that it gets refreshed. Awesome. Here we go. The first thing that we can notice is that the two files were merged into a single file. The file was turned from a TIFF file into a PDF file. So we have merged both of the files and changed the format. Let's start by first looking at the struct map and then checking that the validation stack that worked as expected. As you can see, all three struct maps have been passed and created. Let's take a look at the first logical map. As you can see, the two files struct map were adapted and changed into a single one with the correct file ID that the system provided to us. As you recall earlier, it was carpet 1 and carpet 2 in this case, under the label of chapter 1. Now let's take a look at the second logical struct map. Oh, sorry, I opened the wrong one. Let's take a look at the second one. As you see, in this case, we had page 1 and page 2. Both of them were turned under the label of output with the correct file ID. Now, let's check. As I said earlier, this allowed us also, since we're creating a modified representation, allowed us to run format identification on the file and the whole validation stack on it. So if we go to the DNX section of the file and look at the file format, sorry, the BS outcome, we can see the whole validation stack ran successfully on it and even told us all the information that we require. And that's it from my case. Back to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Wasim. By the way, that was Wasim's work, all of that great development led by Wasim.
Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for that. I will now share my screen. So the next feature, which originated from the working groups, and the motivation here of the working groups was to reduce the number of configurations, to simplify the integration with external systems for harvesting in OAI. And we added support for harvesting multiple OAI sets in a single job. Until now, that required having a configuration and job per set. And now we allow in a single page in a single configuration, harvesting multiple sets from the same source. And so the prerequisite here is that they will have the same base URL, of course, material flow, and update metadata job for all the sets, of course, for having essential management of that single area. I will now pass on the screen over to Dan to show what that looks like in the system. But before that, so that we won't have to skip backwards and forwards, I will mention an additional feature, and then Dan will show both of them one after the other. As I mentioned earlier on, we've invested a lot in the enhanced integration with S3 storage. And here, this is work that we did together with one of our customers. The request was that once S3 endpoint is changed, then they do not want all of the METS files to have an additional update and an additional METS copy for all of the files which are stored in that storage area according to that configuration, because then that would mean that a single configuration will then generate a huge amount of additional AIPs, and therefore we added the capability of, as Dan will show, of being able to adjust the storage and the endpoint, a general configuration in S3 without having to update all of the METS files. Last, for the S3, or the second for the S3, and this is one which Dan will show, is we're supporting manual support for depositing from an S3 source, where users can now also drill down to subfolders in the S3 server and select the deposit folder, unlike what we had till now, where whichever path was configured in the system had to be the direct path to the deposit folder. So we now allow drilling down and allowing further flexibility around selecting the deposit folder. So Dan will now present the two features, which is the manual support for the deposit from an S3 source and multiple sets in a single OAI harvest.
Thank you, Daniel. Give me a minute while I share my screen. Everyone can see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so the first feature that Daniel mentioned and I will show is the OAI harvesting, precisely the support, the additional support for multiple sets for OAI harvesting. So under deposits, we have the OAI harvester job. If I'll go to one job that was already set up, just for us to save some time, then we can see the section with the different details, the job parameters for the job. And what we have added here to support, to be able to have a single job that runs on multiple sets, is actually to change the sets parameter that we have here to be to allow multi-select from a list. Actually, what we see here is based on the URL. We see a list of all the possible sets that this OAI repository has, and we can simply, with the plus sign and the minus sign, add or remove the sets that we want to harvest from. So for example, here I can add Van Gogh and it will be added. If I click the minus, it will go back and so forth. All the parameters, rest of the parameters for the OAI harvesting stayed the same, and they are joined together to all the sets that you choose. Now, in order to test, say you have selected several sets and you want to test different records from different sets to see that they are coming through and everything is okay, then here also we've enriched the test area with a set drop down. So now if you have several sets, you can see the sets according to what was chosen here, and you can choose for each set what record you want to check. Here, for example, I'll choose the first record. I click on test. Sorry. And here you can see, for example, that it succeeded and it got the source record and everything is valid. In this case, we didn't set up any transformation, so no transformation. And of course, also no match in the system. And the same also, apologies. And the same also if I'll choose the other set and do test, then it will take, for example, here the first record from the second test and for the second set, and we'll do the test. You can see here a different title that I mentioned first before the other title, but it's a different record. So this is about the OAI harvesting improvement, and in this way we we made this improve it for you also to be able, when you have many sets, you don't need to configure several jobs, each one for each set. Now you can simply define one job with the list of sets that you want, and the job will take each set at a time when it runs, and harvest all the records with a report at the end. For the second feature mentioned regarding the S3 deposit, we've now added support for manual deposits, and I will show what I mean by manual in a second. Under the submission format, and I've created also here to save some time a submission format S3 deposit submission format. Here it is, new Amazon S3 deposit. If I'll go inside, then we have all the different parameters for the S3 deposits. It's very similar to what there is for the storage. For those of you who are familiar with the endpoint, the bucket, access key, secret key, and so forth. There is also the S3 path or prefix, basically, for the content in the S3, which is what can function basically similar to the folder structure that there is in NFS. If the prefix hold different strings delimited by a slash, then it's a directory structure. So here, for example, we go to the S3 to this bucket and take everything that is under the prefix, or you could say the folder of S3 deposit. Now, in order to allow the manual, and by manual we mean that the user, when they make a deposit, they can go and actually navigate the source where they are trying to deposit from, and select exactly which contact they want to deposit. In order to do that, we've added here the allow navigation checkbox, similar to what, for those of you who are familiar with the NFS, that if it is checked, and here it is checked, it will allow the user to navigate from this position downward in the folder structure in order to pick whatever you want to deposit. So I'll try to do a deposit with this submission format. I've already set up all the things behind the scenes, so connected to material flow and so forth. I'll choose my producer that I want, and I'll add a new deposit, add deposit activity. Here, the one that I connected to all of this, the material flow, is the METS Amazon S3. I already have in the S3 some materials to deposit, and now because I've checked that checkbox of allow navigation, here instead of just give me a label of as it was today of simply the directory and I cannot change it, of where I basically take the files from, now I get a navigation area where I can basically navigate through the structure in the S3 and choose exactly what I want. So for example, under the S3 deposit, I have the prefix basically continues with METS and then a slash, so I know this is a directory by itself. So I'll click on, for example, on METS, and I will drill inside more to see what there is more, really like NFS navigation for folders. I go into deposit example and I continue to more and more. I think you get the idea. And I can basically choose what I want to deposit. For example, I'll click on deposit example and do next. And that means that I want to take all the files that are basically under the deposit example one, or the prefix of S3 deposit slash METS slash deposit example one. It gives me the location that I've chosen. I'll just submit. And I've submitted it. Basically, I can see it here. This is what I did. It's today, 20th of March. And I can see it also. I won't go over all the flow, but here, for example, I can go now I'll search for it in the submissions. I can see it's here, and in our case, we had a configuration that it lands in the assessor, but from here it's the regular deposit flow. So I think I'll stop here. That's it. Back to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Dan. By the way, Dan created the design for all these features. A great job.
Oh, thank you.
I will now grab back the screen. So I'll talk about some of the preservation related features that we introduced as part of 8.1. So as you know, today you can search by the different automatic rules which are created in the system for managing different issues which are discovered on the content, and allows you to streamline the whole validation stack process, the TA, the technical analyst workbench, and to automate the processing of your content as much as possible. And we've recently introduced the splitting of format validation from the metadata extraction. And so you can now create rules specifically for format validation, and you can now also search by those rules. So just to show you what this looks like in the system, here you can see as an example, the format validation errors. And here we decided to ignore a specific error which came from, I think this was Vera PDF, an error which was discovered in PDF. You can decide to ignore it, and then you have this error message, the document catalog, etc. So then we can search for, in the data management, search for objects, validation error, contains keywords, catalog. We even have the error message, which is quite a long one, as part of the response. Let me switch this to intellectual entity. And this is the result. We can just take a look, just in case you don't believe me. One of the PDFs, we'll look at the metadata. And under the file validation section, you can see the full message of what was ignored, what was the error message that came from Vera PDF, which was ignored, and it's now searchable, both the ID and the actual message itself. The next feature introduced was, this came from the working groups, the ability, we now display the rule ID and the rule list and the rule details. You can export the ID, and this allows you to manage it better, not just according to the description, but also the ID is now explicit and for the actual rule. So if we take, for example, under the format identification correction, you can see here the ID of the rule. You can search by it. You can also search, so it gives you this response, and also you can search specifically by ID. And also when you export all the rules, then you can see here that you have the ID column as part of the export. So moving on. Two additional important enhancements. One is the ability to validate source metadata on ingest. So until now, you have XSDs in the system to validate different metadatas which are applied for the editor. And the request was to apply the same type of validation when the content is ingested, so that it can be blocked if there is an issue with the content. And so this could be for any source metadata. It could be, of course, mods and whatever you decide to deposit, and it runs against a respective customizable XSD schema. So you can apply your own XSD schema or adjust it according to your own needs, and you can in that way also ingest any type of source metadata. And let's just briefly see what that would look like in the system. So we have a pre-ingested a SIP which has an erroneous mods structure. So you see it here parked in the technical analysis workbench, and when you view the errors, you can see here the main error over here is that there is an element called not a title instead of title info. So at this point, you can work on it, and you can just to see how it works for correcting the issue. You can replace the file with a fixed. Here I fixed it to be the correct element name, title info, continue, and then we can resubmit, and it then goes through correctly into the system. So that just does another level of validation on your content, drilling down to the structure of the source metadata inside the METS file. Basic preservation plan. Then here we're seeing more and more usage of the basic preservation plan. And just to remind those who aren't familiar, the preservation plan, there are two paradigms or levels of complexity. One is really the advanced one, the one which was really created, started being created 15 years ago, and allows comparing different alternatives, and is risk-based, and allows sort of complex evaluations. And then we added a more straightforward or basic plan, which is tailored for a use case where an institution knows which files they want to migrate over to which format, and they can still run evaluations, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a risk-based a preservation plan. It could be based on any set, which any logical set which the institution defines. And here we've added some capabilities following discussions with the customers to be able to create an itemized preservation set, not just logical, and also as part of refining the execution, the set for execution, to be able to add not just an AND operator, but also an OR operator, so you can actually expand the set as part of the refining. And just so you see exactly what I'm talking about, so first of all, under the managed preservation set, so to create a standard, a basic preservation plan, you can do it from here, just add your own set. And at this stage, you can already, this is what's new, this was added here, the ability to create an itemized set, not just logical. If you have a predefined fixed set of files that you want to run this on, and you can add set similar to a set of an itemized set in Rosetta. You can add set from members files from an external file, and that's also pretty straightforward to go ahead with this flow. And then if we take a look at signed off plans. So this is a signed off plan with a logical set, and when we'll execute the plan, you can refine the execution set. And here you can see that you can now either match all or any, so that expands the sets if you require. So it just provides more flexibility around managing the sets throughout the execution. And then alternatively, if we go for a set which was based on an itemized set, then when you execute it and you want to refine the set, then you can delete set members from file and delete selected. So of course, it's more of a manual process since it's itemized and not logical. So here again, we encourage you to start using this workflow, which is really becoming very straightforward, and to give us further feedback. So I will, if I'm already in the system, I'll show an additional enhancement of where we've now indexed the format library version field. So as you know, every file is, when it's processed against a specific format library version, and that was defined to be an important piece of information which should be indexed and searchable in the system. So if we search for objects, you can now search according to format library version, and we can search it according to one of the latest, 7.4109. And here we have results, and you can see here some were created a long while ago, but there was an additional processing on one of the files recently. If we take one of these, for example, under the metadata, you can see the file format, and we have both Siegfried and Droid run on the same file. And here you can see 7.4109, which is the format library version according to which the processing was done. So just a few words about the infrastructure work, which we put a huge investment in. So first of all, a new online help. There's actually an article about it. This took a long while. We're now happy to come out with a new online help, which is not just PDF based. It's really aligning with the sort of MindTouch infrastructure of the other products at Exlibris, which will allow us to update it in an easy way for you, mainly for you to be able to search for content in a much easier way, to add comments and all the great stuff which you have as part of your standard documentation. I know that sometimes it's a struggle till now with the PDFs. You don't always know which PDF includes the piece of information which you require, and now it will be searchable across all the content of Rosetta. And of course, if you can search in Google, it could also give you results here from inside the actual text. So also here, feel free to explore, give us some feedback. This is the homepage where you have the documentation, and you can see here you have the different guides, drilling down to the different sections. So this was really a major project done by the Exlibris documentation team, here to encourage you to go and explore. CData, I won't go into too many technical details, but this was really an end-to-end massive infrastructure effort, which was also led, by the way, by Wasim, which was really touching the core of the system, it was basically decomposing one of the third parties that we work with, the XML beans, exposing some of the configurations in XML beans, and then recompiling it into the system. And we now expose some of the those parameters out to the end users so that it will allow for a consistent management of C data, which is ingested by institutions into the system. So we didn't want to change existing behavior. So therefore, the parameter which changes the behavior is set to false by default. Any institution who thinks they have C data or they for surely have managed C data in the system, then you should feel free to enable it. I do encourage you to test out some of the files to start with, just to make sure there aren't any issues, and feel free to reach out to us also if you want to test it together. As I said earlier on, it looks innocent, but this is actually a huge infrastructure change that's done as part of this release. And as usual, we've added many third-party upgrades to make sure that your system, your environment, is up to date and as secure as possible. And these are 4 of the components that we've upgraded, among others. So just a glimpse into 8.2. These are some of the improvements that we're going to be adding. Around data management, we're going to be expanding the ability to add a reason for editing metadata in the system. So we recently added for descriptive metadata. We're now going to expand this to any type of metadata. The user, the administrator, or whoever, the data manager, will be able to add a reason why this data was changed, which is of course important for preservation purposes. That will be added to the events relative to the events, equivalent events, which could be for editing, for adding, for deleting. The online help. So this is important. I forgot to note this, but currently, because the infrastructure of online help was adjusted, then currently the page-sensitive online help currently is still pointing to the documentation of 8.0. So if you want to see documentation for the new features, go to the online help and not to the page, not to the inline help inside Rosetta. That will still point to 8.0. That is part of the change which you're going to be doing in 8.1, so that also the page-sensitive help will point to the online help, each page with its equivalent documentation. We do allow any institution who is still interested in having PDF files for any internal documentation purposes, reach out to me and I'll send over to you a copy. They can be provided. In addition, we're going to be adding support for indexing structural map attributes, which was a request that came from the working groups, in addition to making the event outcome detail searchable and indexed in the system. Integrations, we're going to be, ignore the first one that was done as part of 8.0, but we are going to be continuing our support for S3. We're going to expand the support. We have today a storage integrity job, which identifies orphan files or dead links in the database. We're going to expand the support also to S3 storage. We're also going to be expanding the user management REST API to support shared users, and continue with the infrastructure upgrades, structs, Vera PDF, and others. A call out to all of you to come to Dallas to the annual working group meeting, June 3rd to 5, hosted by the Southern Methodist University. It's going to be super interesting this year. It is every year. Specifically this year, we're going to be talking about certainly existing Rosetta, but also a lot of emphasis is going to be on our progress and plans with the next generation Rosetta, where we're deep into the design and the development of Rosetta Plus, and also a lot of thoughts which we want to share and collaborate with the community for Rosetta Pro and for the upcoming versions of Rosetta. We're going to have some expert representatives from Ex Libris to talk about some of the great benefits that we see in the Ex Libris platform, which could serve specifically digital preservation workflows. And so I think this is going to be a really good opportunity. So I hope you've registered already. Otherwise, please go ahead and see what can be done, because it will be also a good opportunity to both to speak to us and to other members of the user community. So that's it for today. Stop sharing. It's great to see you all. Feel free to send through any questions that you have. Email directly to me. I want to thank Dan and Wasim again for presenting the great work which did this release. And thank you all for joining. I'm going to stop the recording, but of course, anyone who has any additional questions, feel free to ask.